Everyone, is everybody ready for a fun day?
Yeah.
All right, well, you guys are the morning session, so I commend you for getting on here and getting here for the first session and the keynotes. Again, my name is Jason Meshko of Intouch Insurance Services. We're a full-service risk management insurance brokerage. We're licensed in 39 states throughout the United States. Intouch Live is our event risk management educational brand. Erez and I created this brand about 5 years ago, and we do educational risk management and network events throughout the United States. This is the first one that's in the New York area. We've been doing golf tournaments and other educational events in the LA area, and this is our first attempt to go to the New York area to do a unique event where we have 4 sessions. We have four sessions, 3 breaks, we have interviews, and then we have a game and a networking and a reception to follow. So it's a unique event. So without further ado, I want to introduce Doug Howard, the CEO of Ponderance. They are our Diamond Grand sponsor, and he's got a few words to kick off today. And Doug, come on up.
So it looks like we're still waiting for about half of the crowd to make it here. Everybody has had their planes, trains, and automobiles, including myself, who was stuck in an elevator with 9 people this morning for 20 minutes. So, and no alcohol either. So, we've got a great set of panels today. We've got a great group of people. Obviously, a lot of expertise in the audience as well. So I would encourage you guys to speak up, not dominate, but speak up occasionally whenever you have an opinion or input or questions, obviously, for the audience. We obviously are seeing a lot of change in the industry. Some of you are dead in the middle of cyber insurance as well as broker space. Some of you are on the delivery side, and some of you are on the IP side as well. So I would, ask everybody to think about the broadness of the audience here too as we walk through these things. Make sure that you're using and explaining terms and so forth as we go through this. For our part, our strategy is very straightforward. We believe that small, medium-sized companies as well as large companies deserve cost-effective security, and that's on the 24/7 monitoring side, which if you ask me, where can I spend my dollars? I would always say on the 24/7 side, because pretty much all the bad stuff you do on the hygiene side should be caught on the monitoring side. That's not to say don't do all the other things, but we also have an IR team. Max, our leader, is here as well, and then we also have compliance consulting. And so across the spectrum, we've grown from 50 people in late 2020 to now just over 110 people, 150 people by the end of the year. So it's a hot marketplace for all of us, right? So for us, bad things are a good thing, not for all of you. We recognize that as we go through these presentations as well. We have seen a lull in IR work for the last 3 or 4 months. That's pretty consistent across a lot of the companies. And we believe that there will be a rebound on that for the rest of the year, and we're starting to see that pick up, and we'll talk about that in one of the panels later today as well. So you're going to hear a lot of information across the spectrum. Thanks for coming, and thanks for having us here.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Our next keynote speaker, platinum sponsor, is Timothy Taurus. He's the CSO of Trinette, which is an outsourced PEO. You outsource your HR, your admin, your health benefits, and your workers' comp. We are a client, Intouch Insurance, of Trinette. We've partnered with them for the last 4 to 5 years. So Timothy, come on up and say a few words. Give Timothy a round of applause. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So first, it's good to have my wife with me. Tomorrow's our anniversary, and I wanted to make sure that she... So I am the Chief Security Officer at Trinette, and I am passionate about what we do and how security can enable our organization to propel the 17,000 plus clients and over 340,000 worksite employees to fulfill their mission every day. And as our CEO says, they're out there cleaning air, finding cures for cancer, changing and transforming communities, performing research and development on new drugs that will help maintain and respect human dignity. Those are the things that inspire me, and where security plays a role, as you know, in the industry that we're in today, highly reliant on the digital platforms and the information sharing age that we live in. And unfortunately, we've seen a rapid explosion. In fact, in the last 12 months, 100% increase roughly of ransomware. And over 85 to 90% of these successful cyber attacks are the result of phishing humans. And so when you bridge humans and technology and critical infrastructure and banking and personal information and communities that thrive on this, you have a problem, and the cybersecurity problem is not going anywhere. And so as I said, I'm passionate to help Trinette fulfill our mission, and Trinette's a great organization. I've been there now for 18 months, and happy to talk more afterwards about what we do. But I can say that Trinette takes security seriously, and we are here to help serve our customers, our colleagues, and our communities. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Timothy. Today. The first session is the future of cyber risk. This session has been, the title has been changed numerous times, which I think is great because it provokes the thought process of where we are in the cyber ransom technology world. I want to introduce the moderator, Natasha Fuentes. She's the account executive from Sophos. Natasha, come on up. I'm going to give you guys a couple mics right there, and you can introduce yourself.
All right. Well, we have George UC up first, and Timothy Taurus and Hillard Sterling. I'm going to sit over here so I can... Okay, so everyone had their coffee, right? You guys are comfy?
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for coming, and we're so excited to be speaking on this. Let's get into it. This is the Future of Cyber Risk panel, and today we are going to dig into how hackers are digital arsonists and thieves. They abscond with your data by breaking into your internet-delivered business to set smoldering backdrafts of ransomware loaded with sneaky, malicious code that linger in your networks and devices for months, until digital deviant threatens to burn down your digital world. We have been fighting these cybersecurity fires on the ground, and we are losing. A cyber risk management air war is evolving in the digital battlefield of fallen CEOs and board members, with legal ramifications that include plaintiffs, lawyers, and regulators who are circling like hungry vultures around the victim. The US government has somewhat come to the rescue through new US guidelines with the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or Nist, and Sisa. Today, we hope that you learn these three items. 1, awareness for business owners, CEOs, board members, and insurance carriers on these evolving governance issues. 2, understand that this problem is no longer just a tactical ground war anymore. And 3, the final takeaway, what you should be doing right now. And this is where you want to take notes. That's the part where all right, everyone get their notebook out for that one. And with no further ado, let's introduce our panelists. On the end here, we have Hillard Sterling. Hillard is counsels clients on developing and implementing best practices before, during, and after data breaches and incidents. Since strong preventative measures are central to proving compliance and reducing exposure and damages, Mr. Sterling works with clients to 1, develop or improve policies, incident response plans, and data governance plans. 2, develop or improve employee training procedures and techniques. 3, develop or improve tabletop exercises. And 4, comply with governing law and stay current with the latest cyber law developments. The underlying objective of all of these measures is to help clients establish a cybersecurity corporate culture. Hillard also assists insureds and other clients as a breach coach to coordinate and quarterback responses to data breaches or incidents. Please welcome Hillard.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I apologize for the long bio. It looks shorter on paper.
I gotta introduce everyone. You guys are amazing, so really gotta show everyone what you guys do. Next, we have Timothy. You guys all met him, but let me just really showcase everything that he's done. Timothy is the Chief Security Officer at Trinette. With over 20 years of experience in security and technology, Timothy brings a rich perspective on how organizations can balance risk as they fulfill their mission and safely serve their customers. Timothy is an author and frequent guest speaker. His most recent work on medical device cybersecurity was published by the Association of the Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, or the AAMI. Timothy is also board director for HealthRight 360, based in San Francisco, California, and serves as an advisory board member for several cybersecurity companies. Timothy holds a BS from Azusa Pacific University and an MBA from the University of Southern California. In addition to holding numerous certifications, Timothy studied at Harvard University and MIT on cybersecurity and technology strategy and innovation. Once again, please welcome Timothy.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have George UC. I'm getting his name right. George is the CEO of OmniStruct Inc., a cyber governance as a service provider focused on IT service providers and their small, mid, and enterprise customers. In his career, George designed, advocated, and contributed to the upgrade of the internet infrastructure, IPv6, through first responder and delay-tolerant network research initiatives with the University of New Hampshire, IOL, UC Berkeley Labs, Naval Postgraduate School, and the National Institute of Science and Technology. George also pioneered the design, construction, and testing of the first IPv6 interoperable network for first responders, MetroNet 6, with mentorship from HP fellow Jim Bound, Google Vice President Dr. Vint Cerf, who we'll hear from in a little bit, and HP fellow Yannick Bouvray, for which he was awarded the 2007 Internet Pioneer Award by his fellow colleagues and mentors at the IPv6 Forum. George is also a board member of not-for-profit Secure the Village and co-chair of the California IPv6 Task Force. Everyone, welcome George.
And I get the privilege of introducing Natasha. I'm going to ask to steal her notes. I was going to read it off my phone, but I will try to go off of memory. So Natasha originates from she is a 10-year veteran of the cyber insurance industry. And so she's a great resource for us, not just as a moderator, but as an expert of kind of understanding what happens in the trenches in insurances. And so it's a great fit for our panel, and Natasha specifically has done a fabulous job in herding the cat, so to speak, for our event today. So thank you, Natasha.
Thank you so much.
She works for Sophos now.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sophos folks. So I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, I just recently joined Sophos, so if you haven't seen me before, that's why. Well, George, I want to give you a few minutes to help explain cyber risk and how Nist and Sisa are applicable. And also we will have a little clip from Dr. Vint Cerf.
We'll get to that after.
Yeah.
I'm efforting on it.
Sorry, we have a backup plan, Jason, if that doesn't work.
Yeah, if there's...
My son's already with a Bluetooth speaker, if you can't get it on that. So let me first tell everybody a little bit about this issue of, as Natasha had mentioned in the introduction, cybersecurity is a ground war, an air war is evolving, and the US government has come to the rescue somewhat with the Nist special publications and family of writings. So curiously enough, we realized as scientists that hackers aren't just thieves, they are arsonists first. And we lack what essentially is an adequate national and regional cyber fire department. And Nist is essentially the origination, along with Sisa, or Sisa, depending upon where you're from and how you want to pronounce it. Vint, just in January, said, officially, we have our national cyber fire department with Sisa. So we're going to be talking about Nist and Sisa, and I promise I will not go geek on you today. My introduction probably sounded like I'm going to twirl a little propeller on the top of my head. So I'm going to ask you to play this, and I'm going to tell you the context behind this. We had I invited Vint to a Secure the Village event. So the good news is the entirety of this recording can be found on securethevillage.org. I'm one of the active board members along with Jason on this entity, and we brought Vint to one of our meetings. And it's about a 45-minute long presentation. I did some extracts from the presentation for all of you to hear, and I promise none of them are technical, but they're eye-opening, or ear-opening in this case. So, go ahead.
To tell you a little bit about where I think we are right now in terms of safety and security in the internet. And I would have to argue that we're not in a very good place right now. Which is that not all of the general public has everyone else's best interests at heart. That's why we still read Shakespeare, because 400 years later, he still tells us about all of the nasty foibles of human behavior. So we got an increasing amount of misbehavior on the network, the generation of malware, propagation of denial of service attacks, or spam, all kinds of other fraud and abuse of various kinds, bullying. I mean, there's a long list. And if you're like me, you may have come to the conclusion that security in the network has a kind of an insurmountable amount of inconvenience to it, some irreducible inconvenience associated with good security. For example, two-factor authentication, which I think is a very valuable concept, and one which I make use of myself at Google and in my interactions with banks, and just recently I got yet another key fob for Nist, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology. And so as much as I like using those things because I feel like they are protecting me more than just usernames and passwords, I've also discovered that I have about 300 accounts in various places around the internet, and the idea of carrying a bag full of 300 dongles does not appeal to me at all. And I would argue that in the enterprise space, we have a similar problem. There are, I don't know, some significant number of businesses in the US, I don't remember what the absolute number is, but it seems like 30 million or something. Whatever it is, most of them are small. They have fewer than 10 employees. In fact, a lot of them, the bulk of them probably have 1 or 2 or 3 or something like that. So they don't have an IT department. And they don't know where to turn when they're trying to either fix something or set something up, or deal with a denial of service attack or some other malware attack. And so I've been touting the idea of a cyber fire department, which makes me think a little bit of your term, cyber guardians. The idea there would be that the private sector should have a place to go when it's got a cyber fire.
Thank you for helping me bail us out on that audio issue. So for the very first part, if you were unable to hear, the message was that we're not in a very good place right now. So when one of the co-creators of the internet raises their hand and says that, then clearly we have an issue. And there's an origin and a story behind that issue. So I encourage you, when you have an opportunity, to go to the Secure the Village events page. It's actually, there's a YouTube channel for Secure the Village. You can listen to that recording in its entirety. I promise you, it's not super propeller head-like. There are some other things that he covers, but it is eye-opening in the very simple sense that a cyber fire department is necessary. Right? The question becomes, is that a public cyber fire department? Is it private sector? What can we do to address that? So, and we're going to be talking about this. I mentioned that he made an announcement that Sisa, your cyber fire department, was just made in January. This recording was from July of 2020 during the pandemic. There is still a gap, though, regionally, in terms of having those resources within a region like Los Angeles has Secure the Village, and we're trying to solve that problem of having a regional reactive as well as proactive entity to address that, and that's part of the Secure the Village mission, is to be that resource regionally in LA, because Hollywood producers and how they create films and that industry that's centered in that area, and I think we see some of that here in New York as well, is different. Cybersecurity is different. Like when they protect a film, they create 67 versions of one film for the distribution market, so when they send films out. Where I'm from in Sacramento, we don't know anything about that. So it differs, and securing things differs from industry to industry.
Thank you so much, George. With no further ado, why don't we start asking some questions? So our first question of the day, for each of you, what are your thoughts on how the Nist frameworks and maturity models, CMMC, CSF, PF, how they fit with other regulatory compliance, and their impact on future of cyber risk? George, will you start us off?
It's going to be a lot of me at the beginning, so sorry, folks. So what's interesting about this framework concept is, I call this, all these different regulatory compliance and statutory requirements, even industry requirements, I call it the alphabet soup of cyber compliance, because there's so many acronyms. There's SOC 2, there's NIST in the field of 800-171 is CMMC. I could go on and on and on with like 3 and 4 letter acronyms. That's why it's alphabet soup. There's so many that we don't really have a common ground, a foundational ground upon which all can be addressed, which we can recognize here in the US, especially in litigation in the courtroom in what are called safe harbor conditions. So for those of you that are risk managers, you should have understand that. That's one of the reasons we have Hillary here to talk to that point. But you also need, when you're establishing a framework, if you decide on your own what it is that you're going to do, it has to be a choice of reasonability these days, which is generally not always great if you're following just PCI, or if you're following just some other regulatory framework, industry and power, SCADA, NERC, and those sorts of things. Fine and dandy, but what about privacy laws that are emerging? Because that's what the reaction has been with lawmakers. So there's different things that have to be done there. Oh, do you have that much? They have microphones over there.
So what I would add to that is, if you stop and think about other industries, think about the aviation industry. Years ago, there was a time when there wasn't a level of precision with standards for quality and safety. I remember reading of literally in Canada, an airplane ran out of fuel, and the pilot miraculously landed this plane. And the reason that the plane ran out of fuel is the people working, one was using the metric system, the other was using the imperial, and they didn't have the right processes in place and standards to help prevent that from happening. And the same concept applies to the digital age that we live in, which I said a few minutes ago. Our entire economy, culture, society, and sovereignty relies and is built on the use of technology. Yet, through the years, we have not had the level of adoption of these standards of quality, safety, and best practices that we're referring to when we say NIST and when we use these other acronyms. I'm not sure, all of you in the room, what your level of awareness on these frameworks and best practices are. But the point that I think is salient is that the small to medium-sized business community, statistics and studies have shown that 1 in 3 cyber attacks are targeted to small to medium-sized businesses. And 1/3, so according to a recent report, aren't even able to stay in business after 6 months, these small to medium-sized businesses. Yet 60% of small to medium-sized business owners did not believe in a recent survey that they were subject to or a target of cyber attacks. So the point that I think is a real one and a problem that we need to solve is awareness and embracing of the requirements that we all must sort of adopt so that we can build a safer culture in society. And so that's the premise, and that's really why I got on an airplane and flew here, is I am passionate about helping raise awareness. There's absolutely a lack of expertise, and that's where the frameworks help, but we have to start with awareness, and then we can talk about what under the hood these frameworks actually do.
I'll tackle it from the compliance and litigation perspective. NIST and all these alphabet soup of standards, that none of those are going to stop plaintiffs from filing lawsuits, right? If anything, they fuel the litigation because they're ammunition for plaintiffs to show that the defendants who were victimized by a hack and now are victimized by a lawsuit failed to satisfy those standards, and they use them as checklists. And even if the standards were satisfied, the plaintiffs still have their go-to of negligence theory that you failed to act reasonably. And satisfying those standards weren't enough. But your work, your efforts, all of that stress and strain and money in a plaintiff's eyes are just ammunition. So what does that mean? I mean, it doesn't mean you ignore the standards. Of course, you have to satisfy them because they're a baseline. And so we have to counsel our clients, these organizations, these companies, to satisfy them, to do the best so they have a good story to tell. Plaintiffs and regulators love low-hanging fruit. So if you didn't satisfy the standards, get out the checkbook, and it's going to be a very large number. But if you did, a lot of these plaintiffs are going to move on. They want the easy case. So if they're going to invest their time in filing a class action lawsuit, and you have a good story to tell, you may, if not avoid the lawsuit, certainly settle it a lot earlier and for a lot less money. So that's the importance of the standards from my perspective in the litigation realm.
And I think that's a good point. The other thing is that we've actually seen situations that in California, we have this thing called CCPA, CPRA. Some of you are probably familiar with it by now. And here we have New York Shield. A little bit different in scope, obviously, and one is a comprehensive data privacy law. And we actually had a situation where one of our clients who had a compromise through an MSP impact them. And the state of California came a-running. However, they were illustrating and demonstrating reasonable use of NIST CSF and had started privacy assessments for NIST PF. The state of California dropped the multi-million-dollar case as soon as they saw that they could demonstrate they were doing the right thing. So that's a point on Hillard that we actually have those kinds of case studies, which makes it more important to be aware of these frameworks.
Thank you, everyone. Such great advice and information. So our next question. Many states, as you guys have been talking about, are adopting safe harbors or protections for companies that satisfy certain standards of care, like NIST. How safe are those harbors in reality? Hillary, why don't you start us off as our legal counsel?
Well, I'll jump in because I view these safe harbors as dangerous minefields, as much as they're any protection for companies. Let's take the CCPA, for example. They give you the right to cure. So the plaintiff has to write a letter and give the company a chance to cure. Is that going to stop any plaintiffs from filing lawsuits? No, it's just another step in the process. And there's some precedent in California on the right to cure under a different statutory framework. That curing doesn't mean just fixing the problem now, it means fixing all of the negative effects that the problem caused. So how can you even satisfy that cure? So it's another step in the process of a litigation pebble over which these plaintiffs will jump. It's not even a hurdle. I do, though, think that there are legitimate safe harbors, and some states are coming up with better ideas. For example, safe harbors that are clear, where if you get a certification, of your data security compliance, then the plaintiffs can't file a lawsuit, or at least can't go after statutory damages. They have to show actual harm, which of course is a massive issue in data security litigation. In that Spokio, the Supreme Court decision that required actual harm has almost no impact in data security cases. Almost all the courts, certainly most of them, the vast majority of them, are holding that you don't need to really show actual harm because the violation of privacy is such a fundamental right that that's harm in itself. So these safe harbors need to be very clear. Ohio, I think, is on the right track with their standards that if you satisfy them, but why not also incorporate a good faith principle in the safe harbor? A lot of these companies, despite all of their best efforts, may not satisfy all of the standards out there and meet that safe harbor, but if they were undertaking a good faith effort to try to do so, that itself should be an affirmative defense in litigation. And I think it is an affirmative defense anyway because it cuts against a lot of the standards under negligence theory and a lot of statutory causes of action, but it should be crystal clear in these supposed safe harbors.
When I think of safe harbors, who I think about are what essentially are the geeks, right? These folks that are fighting this ground war. I'm sure, can I get a raise of hands? Are there any geeks here at all? There's a couple, right? Important to understand that putting the burden of making an executive decision on whether or not you're filtering certain kinds of traffic may not be their decision, maybe the best decision for them to make. They're going to look to the boss and say, do you want me to filter this content or not? It's just kind of in the trenches situation. And the reality is that they're going to try to do their best to help make the decision because they want to be helpers. And they're very good at what they do. However, when a different approach of we need to do this 6 things, and the CFO and the CEO says, well, we don't have a budget for that, you can only do 1. When I think about things like safe harbor and those kinds of situations, that's when I think about these safe harbor laws and how important they can be, but also the criticality of adopting a framework, but being prepared for when the hacker crashes into your network. And one of the challenges we also have, and I think there's been a joke in the technical community, don't take offense to this please, the technical folks, but we used to joke with each other about our service tickets years ago, right? We would assign a ticket and the next tech would be like, what did you do? And the service ticket would say, fixed it. That's it. It's closed, fixed it. With no detail whatsoever on what was done. Now, if you do the same thing in a security incident, we've got an issue. And the joke that we used to have is, hey man, if I ever gave you the responsibility to summarize the works of Shakespeare. I actually did this once, is summarize all the works of Shakespeare. I was kind of expecting, I'm more of a writer, so I'm expecting a 10-page summary. I got a sticky note with comedy, tragedy. That's what's happening in tickets sometimes. And so reality is that you need to understand that technical teams are very, very busy. They don't do this on purpose. Some of them may not be the best writers in the world, and that was always the running joke. But the reality is that if you demonstrate, you have to make sure that the detail is in those tickets. And so that's an important part of safe harbor. Sure, you could, pretend like you did these things, but if somebody drills in, they're going to want to see action and that you demonstrated and illustrated. That way, these safe harbors can actually be somewhat defended. We have an affiliate of a lot of privacy attorneys. One attorney specifically said to me, my wife knows I'm having a love affair. I said, what? But his wife's right in front of me. He said, yeah, with documentation. I love it. Right? I want that, and there's hardly any sometimes, and I love that when that happens, when there's poor documentation. So illustrating frameworks is not just about the policies and those sorts of things, but just keep in mind that, there is from a safe harbor perspective, there's a responsibility that executives now have to make sure that they're supporting these technical teams and giving them the resources that they need, especially those that work for managed service providers and IT service providers. Those are challenging situations, and the MSSPs that are out there as well. They need to make sure that things are illustrated and documented. So as leaders, you can be held accountable for those things now. So when I think about safe harbor, that's what I think about.
just to interject briefly, all of those service tickets and sticky notes are all discoverable unless they're managed very carefully and properly with outside counsel. So what are your clients or your insureds, what are they writing down? They're writing down a lot of bad stuff, and it goes right out the door, right in the hands, and that check keeps getting larger and larger with each sticky note, with each service ticket. So this is a document and information management issue as well.
Timothy?
I'll add just a few points. Completely agree. Using sort of the analogy of a cyber attack and the sort of the fire department, if I were to answer this from just looking at someone, a person on the street, and explaining safe harbor and the reason why there's value, I would liken it to a funny story, not so funny at the time, but now it is. Our 7-year-old, I think at the time he was probably 4, actually started a fire in the house, knocked over a candle, it lit the house on fire, in a small section. And I don't know how he did this, but he went intuitively, grabbed a towel, put it over the fire, and put it out. He then went and told his mommy that there was a fire and that he put it out. And the point being is that we tell our kids, you're safe with us if you tell us what you did wrong. You're not going to get us in trouble. You're going to have some coverage here. But if you don't tell us, there's more trouble coming your way. And the point that this is relevant is for years we have not had transparency when an incident or breach would occur. And over time, states have developed their own sort of breach disclosure requirements from a privacy standpoint. Now there are over 50 actually. We have 50 states. Last time I checked, there are over 50, I believe, breach notice requirements. And it's because there's not sort of continuity with what the actual approach should be taken. When they're safe harbor, they're trying to create the environment where people speak up and that the damage against them won't be so severe. And what we're seeing now with the SEC recently coming up with requirements for notice of disclosure for public companies, Sisa has a 7-day, I believe, for critical infrastructure. You're seeing more and more regulatory constraint or requirements come into breach notification and disclosure because we haven't had that transparency. Without that, not only the regulatory environment shifts in a way, but being able to help as a society learn and act together to help reduce the rate of occurrence is at stake as well. And so I think that's probably my unique perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well, I hope that you guys have your notebooks ready. This is where it starts to become really applicable to everyone. So for our final question of the day, what should everyone be doing right now? And Timothy, do you want to start this one?
Sure, and so you probably can tell, I'm very practical in my thinking. I like to think about what's the bottom line. We talk about Sisa, we talk about Nist. To you, that's probably an acronym. You're Googling it, you're looking it up, and you will get publication after publication, hundreds of pages long of academic content that you can't walk away with any real clear picture of what number 1, 2, and 3 things should I do. So the point that I think is relevant is awareness, as I mentioned earlier. What I would like to say is if you haven't already, and if you're a small to medium-sized business, this is really, I think, poignant. You can go to the Nist website and the CSF framework. You can look at the Nist Starter Kit. And what it does is it takes this massive body of best practices and knowledge and it distills it into something very tangible. They have a small to medium-sized business page and they have toolkits and they have information that stopransomware.org. They have all of these sites and toolkits to help organizations in a practical way take measurable steps to reduce incidents and increase their security posture. Sisa also has a Sisa Security Essentials Kit. Again, very similar to what I just mentioned. They have A to Z, the things that you can take away and do today that will help make a big impact on your organization. That, I think, if I were to speak any longer, I would probably lose the emphasis of what I've said. Check those out. They're very relevant and they're very helpful, and I think that you should begin implementing those.
Well, I hope everyone got that. You can talk to Tim after this and really get that down. Hillard, why don't you add a little bit to this?
Just a couple of points. First of all, a big amen to that. Absolutely, it's a great place to go to have tangible, specific steps. So certainly that's massive. Two things that I think every company needs to be doing, or they're just negligent. One is, first of all, get cyber insurance. Okay, and I know I preach to the choir here, but it's so critically important. That's my first piece of advice to any group of clients or prospects before whom I speak. Please get cyber insurance and make sure you work with a good broker to get it so you're really protecting your company. And the first step, though, in terms of a tangible step to have a story of being reasonable, hence being not negligent, do a really good risk assessment. Risk assessments are the bare minimum, but a risk assessment is only strong as it's put together. It could turn into a massive problem if it's not specific, if it's not tailored to that organization, because plaintiffs will just use that in their litigation to show negligence per se, that you didn't even understand your own risks. So how can you possibly address them? You don't want your clients, your insureds facing those questions in a deposition. And also manage the information properly. Risk assessments really are attorney-client communications. They should be. They should be done with outside counsel because you're dredging up all the bad information. And you have to. That's the whole point. Why are you creating exhibits for your prospective adversaries? Risk assessments, like any kind of good pre-breach program, should be done in consultation with outside counsel so the information can be protected under the attorney-client privilege. So watch what you're writing. Stop writing emails too. Tell your insureds, your clients, stop writing things down unless you're doing it with your outside counsel as part of the process. So again, you could hold those back if and when litigation erupts.
Thank you, Hillard. As someone that started my career in underwriting, this just spoke to my underwriting heart, and it really is impactful when those insurance carriers are looking at your company. George, I will let you finish us off.
Debated what's the first thing that you should do. Hillard did a great job of identifying that issue. So if you really, really are concerned about your exposure, hire a privacy attorney now to conduct a regulatory impact assessment. Now, what you could do is just toss it over to your IT team who's going to look at you and go, I want to know the laws. I'm not an attorney. Unfair, not advisable. Right? If the regulatory impact is done, you will now have a punch list for them upon which to operate and be prepared to give them the budget to execute on that list. So that's the first thing I would suggest that you do. Now, if you don't have what you feel like is a large exposure to what essentially is sensitive data and some of these privacy laws that are out there, I'm still going to suggest that you do that. You do a regulatory impact assessment. There's obviously going to be a lower end scope for that. But at minimum, if you're going to attack this internally, you should be ramping up some publication within the Nist family. If you already have 800-171, you already have 853, this is more to the 6 or 7 technical people in the crowd. You're going to want that security framework, but you're also going to want to demonstrate and illustrate continuously what you're doing in terms of addressing the cyber risk component. So when we talk about the future of cyber risk, we're not only talking about where things are headed, but there are definitely new regulations coming. Comprehensive data privacy laws being the most, I'd say, aggressive. But there are obviously businesses of all types and industries that you're going to be in a position where you absolutely will need some kind of a foundation. And if you're operating and headquartered here in the US, your foundation should be some Nist body of work, because that's where it's headed. Now, that doesn't mean what you've done already is abandoned. There are ways to cross-reference and cross-map them. So be prepared to hire a helper if you need that help to do that. But that is the most important thing. You get that framework up and running, the cybersecurity framework first, the privacy framework. If you're a little tiny business, your MSP that you hire should be aware of Nist. There's a bunch of Nist stuff. If you have any questions about that, that's what Secure the Village is for, securethevillage.org. You can also reach out to a Nist specialist like us. Our company is OmniStruct. If you look at our brand, if we had it up there right now, Nist is in the middle of the company name. It's really hard to miss us, right? So that was not on purpose. There's a story behind that I can tell you if you want to hear it in the hallway or something. The third thing that you should be doing, and the most important, is you should absolutely prepare an acquisition strategy. There's no way any business can afford the 27 things that come out of those assessments. And that's why the privacy attorney as part of that action is necessary. And we've learned that people who plan and budget, the studies have been done, ISACA and all the different groups, businesses spend 58% less if they just put a little planning in. And believe me, your IT people have told you this before. I have a feeling that maybe an outside helper could be a consideration. And there's tons of MSPs, there's great vendors out there that can do a lot of things that we're talking about. Please make sure that you talk to them about helping you, because the reality is, for me, my vision is simple, and that's to keep sensitive data sacred. And it takes a lot of preparation, and the future of cyber risk is a factor in the sense that there's more regulations, more what we call looming checklists in order for you to retain contracts or earn business. This is a business problem now. Don't toss it over the fence to IT and say, oh, I don't know, I'll pay you the big bucks, you should figure it out. Don't do that anymore, please. Right? This is a CEO problem. I'm also a Vistage CEO. I speak to CEOs about this topic all the time. It's like 12 or 13 at a time, so I have to do a lot of them to reach all 25,000 just on the West Coast. I'm not enough. I need help. I need more. I need all the vendors as well to jump into the community and start educating on these frameworks. That's it.
Thank you so much. So now that you might be a little scared, why don't we open it up to some Q&A? Yeah, you want to start?
So Hilary, you talked about cyber insurance. I mean, isn't that easier said than done? I mean, based on the fact that some companies aren't taking your recommendations seriously and they can't renew their policies, and a lot of these insurance companies don't want to take on that risk. I mean, can you speak to that point?
Sure, it is easier said than done, especially now. Of course, many of us know when cyber insurance started, it was really cheap. It was out there, it was flying off the shelf like hotcakes. Now the market got hard. Premiums are really high, and there's a lot of sub-limits. That's why I tell all of my clients, contacts, get a really good broker who knows the market. It's still out there. You're going to pay more for it than you would have a few years ago, but there's no possible reason why you don't get it. These costs and damages, especially when you're talking about statutory penalties, they're debilitating and material, and they could take down companies, and they have. They've taken down, especially smaller, even smaller middle market companies. So yeah, it's really tough out there. Get a great broker. I know we have a few here at this event who know the market, who can sift through and find that coverage that protects you, and you're gonna have to pay for it, but it's well worth it.
I was going to add a few details too. As someone who just recently came from the broker agency side, it is so important to get it. You ask for as much limit as you can, and then you pare it down from there. But really, the broker is who is going to help guide you through that process. And then also vendors like Sophos can really help you check off the boxes that underwriters are looking for. When they're looking for all those controls, that is your vendor, your cybersecurity vendor, that can help you, be in compliance with the carrier. And there's so many, people are still writing cyber insurance. It's not out the window. You're just going to pay more for it. So, something to be right.
I was going to add that the frameworks help be conversant and competent and show some due diligence to the carriers that I think goes a long way, having a lot of experience going through renewals and seeing the way the landscape has changed over the last couple of years, that is critical more than ever. So I think maybe highlight the fact that yes, everything we just said up till now is true about the frameworks. And in addition, if you want to be better prepared for your cyber insurance, have those frameworks. Exactly.
I want to get your opinion on something that I learned quite a few years ago. So I met this company that they identified the problem a lot differently than a lot of cybersecurity experts have identified a long time ago, in that the hackers and the malware are not the actual root of the problem. That's a symptom. We're talking about a computing architecture that's over 50 years old, and it sounds like you have experience with some of the pioneers in the internet and maybe with the initial, first computing architectures, but they're open platforms. They wanted that for innovation and creativity and so on. And they took a different path in the telecommunications industry, where they have a closed default denied network. Internet and the PC architecture is completely open. There's no such thing as a default deny environment. So I feel like there's a lot more awareness going on in the industry. You're starting to see like some really innovative smaller companies coming out, doing things like class of services, default deny, zero trust, solutions. And I think that's when you're talking like implementing best practices, that's kind of what we do on the human level, policy and procedure type of level, where we say no one has admin access. You can only run something unless it's been whitelisted or approved. I think that is the better approach. That's where we need to go down the road. But it's a cultural thing, right? Nobody likes to be locked out of their system and have to get permission to do things. But there are some organizations that implement those kinds of standards within their networks. But I'm trying to figure out, like, are we going to get to a point where there's a happy medium there?
Well, I'll take I think the question. I don't know if I don't have the answer to that, if there ever will be. I think the biggest challenge that we are trying to solve in that equation is identity and access. And in an open society, it's difficult to be able to architect and have the best of both worlds of what the internet was originally intended to be and what we expect from a right to privacy and the things that we expect from security. I don't know that there's a yes, we will, but I can say that there are a lot of innovation and even standards and practices that are driving more for having better identity architecture that's interoperable. FIDO too, actually, if you read what just a few days ago, Microsoft, Google, and others are now rewriting their authentication architecture to integrate and support this, which is going to basically get us away from passwords. And so that's, I think, a silver lining, that there are strategies that we're seeing play out in the public space.
So, without going all flux capacitor on everybody, this is probably a good discussion for you and I have offline. Also, in light of time, which we have 60 seconds, Jason, if I'm looking at my...
2 minutes.
Oh, wow, we got 120 seconds.
120 seconds.
I'll cite what Vince said in the recording, if you heard it. I know, sorry about the audio, but that's why we read Shakespeare. His point being that compromise is a matter of when. There's always a smarter way. Someone's going to bypass security, sometimes unintentionally, like I did today. I entered this conference with a suitcase with 675 box cutters to give away. I didn't get stopped. Oops. Sometimes we make honest mistakes, like I did today. They're cool, it's a little swag, right? It's not like I came in here, right? But that's what happens, right? People make mistakes. We all make mistakes. That's not my biggest mistake. And back in the 90s when I was running internet backbones, I brought down the country of Japan for 15 minutes. Sorry, Japan. And that's what's going to happen. That's the point, is you're going to learn, people are going to be very Shakespearean, people are going to want to attack and attack and attack. The question becomes, what's the balance? What's the right approach? And how are we reacting? And so day zero, we hear a lot of day zero claims. So please keep in mind, that we are all just human beings here, and the reality is that sometimes mistakes are made, sometimes attackers are so malicious and innovative that you just can't stop them. And sometimes you also have to realize that you have to address the risk in front of you and wants to stop everything, right? There's reasonableness in what you can and can't do, and I'm happy to talk to you about that technical approach later on.
Miller, do you want to 60
And
seconds?
George covered it, and there's no way I could really emphasize as much as George did, but I will say it. Human behavior is really the problem. We talk about technological solutions, and I work with CISOs who are fighting to get to zero trust and implementing all the latest technology. But if your employees are clicking on emails, and if they're victimized by phishing attacks, all that technology didn't help at all. And it's a matter of training, and doing tabletop exercises and getting people aware. Really, that's why security culture is so important.
And with that, thank you to our panelists, and we're on break.